It all began with something so small and ordinary that I never imagined it would spiral into a police situation, because all I did was change my Wi-Fi name inside my own house, not to provoke anyone, not to be funny or disrespectful, just to secure my internet after noticing strange connection drops. But within minutes I felt that familiar uneasy feeling of being watched, and when I glanced outside, I saw the HOA Karen standing near my driveway, phone in hand, staring at my house as if she had just discovered a crime scene, and before I could even ask what the problem was, she marched up and accused me of interfering with community resources, claiming my Wi-Fi change was suspicious and possibly illegal. And when I calmly explained that my internet was private property and had nothing to do with the HOA, her expression didn't soften, instead it hardened, and she said something that instantly told me this situation was about to get out of control. She said she had already called 911 because she believed I was doing something dangerous online, and in that moment I realized she wasn't just overstepping boundaries, she was abusing emergency services to assert power, completely convinced that the police would arrive and side with her, all over something she never had any authority over in the first place. At first I didn't take her seriously because the idea of calling 911 over someone's Wi-Fi sounded too ridiculous to be real, so I went back inside thinking she would cool down once she realized how unreasonable she was being, but only a few minutes passed before the sound of sirens cut through the quiet neighborhood, and that was the moment my stomach dropped, because it meant she had actually gone through with it, and as I stepped outside again, I saw 2 police cars slowly pulling up, lights flashing but no urgency, while neighbors began peeking out of their windows trying to figure out what kind of emergency could possibly involve my house. And before the officers could even approach me, the HOA Karen rushed toward them, pointing in my direction, speaking rapidly, painting me as uncooperative and suspicious, using serious words to turn a harmless Wi-Fi change into something that sounded criminal, while I stood there quietly letting her talk, already sensing from the officers confused expressions that they knew this call didn't make sense. And when one of them finally turned to me and asked what was really going on, I calmly explained the truth, that all I had done was change my personal Wi-Fi name and password, something completely legal, and the moment I said that, I could tell the officers instantly understood that this was not what 911 was meant for. 3. As the officers listened more carefully, one of them asked the HOA Karen a simple but dangerous question: what exact law she believed I had broken. And the moment those words left his mouth, the entire situation shifted, because she froze for a second, then started fumbling through explanations about HOA rules and community standards, clearly realizing too late that neither of those had anything to do with actual law enforcement, and the officer calmly explained that HOA guidelines do not override state or federal law, especially when it comes to private internet usage inside someone's home. And as he spoke, her confident posture began to collapse, her voice lowering, her words becoming defensive instead of authoritative, while the other officer pulled her aside and reminded her that calling 911 is strictly for real emergencies, not personal disputes or control issues, and that misuse of emergency services can itself be considered an offense. And standing there watching her face change from smug certainty to visible panic, I realized she had never expected to be questioned, only obeyed, and for the first time since this started, the power she thought she had was slipping right in front of everyone. For the moment the officer mentioned misuse of 911, the atmosphere completely changed, because what had started as her attempt to control the situation was now turning into a problem for her instead, and you could see it on her face as she realized this call wasn't going the way she had imagined, her voice suddenly softer, her confidence gone. The officer then turned to me and calmly confirmed that changing my Wi-Fi name was completely legal and that I had done nothing wrong, which only made the situation more awkward for her, because now the focus wasn't on me anymore, it was on why she felt entitled to involve emergency services in a personal issue. As the officers continued asking questions, it became clear that this wasn't the first time she had escalated minor HOA disputes, and while they didn't arrest her, they made it very clear that abusing 911 could have serious consequences in the future. And standing there watching her nod silently, avoiding eye contact, I realized she wasn't angry anymore. She was embarrassed, exposed in front of the neighbors she once tried to intimidate, and that public humiliation hit harder than any fine ever could. After the officers finished explaining the situation, they stepped away from the HOA Karen and walked back toward their patrol cars, making it clear that there was no crime and no further action against me, and that short walk alone felt like the final confirmation that her attempt to abuse authority had failed. The moment the police cars pulled away, the neighborhood seemed to exhale, but instead of walking off, the HOA Karen stayed behind, clearly shaken, trying to regain some control by muttering excuses about just doing her job, Yet her words carried no weight anymore because several neighbors who had been quietly watching finally stepped forward, asking her questions she couldn't easily brush aside. And in that moment I realized something important had shifted, because once people see that false authority can be challenged, fear loses its grip, and although she tried to save face, her body language said everything: stiff posture, forced smiles, and quick glances around, knowing the image she had carefully built was starting to crack. As the crowd slowly dispersed, one of the neighbors quietly pulled me aside and told me this wasn't the first time she had used threats to get her way, and hearing that confirmed what I had already suspected, that this incident was part of a much bigger pattern of control. Over the next few days, small things started changing because people who once avoided conflict with her began speaking up in HOA meetings, questioning rules, and asking for transparency, and it all traced back to that one unnecessary 911 call. Meanwhile, she became noticeably quieter, less confrontational, no longer walking around with the same aggressive confidence, and while nothing official was announced, it was obvious her influence was fading. And what surprised me most was how something as simple as protecting my own Wi-Fi had unintentionally sparked a shift in the entire neighborhood's dynamic, proving that standing firm in a small moment can sometimes create ripples far beyond what you expect.